Hello everyone. Today I will tell you the terrifying story that the mother cat had to go through 6 months ago. The story begins as follows. For months, the mother cat wandered the streets with a heavy heart, her eyes clouded with sorrow. It had been 6 months since the horrific accident that took the lives of her 2 precious kittens. The memory of that day was still vivid in her mind. A fast-moving car, the screech of tires, and the tragic thud that followed. Her kittens, innocent and full of life, were taken from her in an instant. The world seemed cruel and unkind as she stood helplessly, unable to protect them. Every day, the grief seemed to grow heavier, and her once bright and playful nature had been replaced by an overwhelming sadness. She still had 2 kittens left, but they too seemed to sense her pain. They stuck close to her, curling up in a tight-knit bundle, trying to comfort their mother in their own way. She would stare off into the distance for hours, lost in thought, as if waiting for something to change. But nothing ever did. The pain, it seemed, was too much to bear. She longed for a miracle, a way to heal the aching void in her heart and restore some kind of happiness in her life. But the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, and nothing changed. Her fur grew matted and unkempt, and she stopped seeking food as eagerly as before. She became more reclusive, hiding in the shadows, her sadness consuming her every move. Her eyes, once bright with curiosity, now looked like dull mirrors reflecting only the sorrow within. No one seemed to notice her, and even the other cats in the area kept their distance, sensing the weight of her grief. But somewhere deep inside her, there was still a flicker of hope, a hope that perhaps one day, something or someone would come along to show her a way out of the darkness. One afternoon, as I was sitting in my living room, I heard a faint sound, a soft meow drifting through the open window. It was a sound I had heard many times before, but this one was different. There was something urgent and desperate in its tone. I immediately stood up and rushed outside, unsure of what I might find. As I stepped into the yard, my heart sank. There, lying beside her remaining kitten, was the mother cat. Her eyes were wide with fear, but they were also filled with a quiet sadness that seemed to go on forever. She was lying perfectly still, as if she were waiting for something to happen, but she didn't move. Her kitten, a small gray tabby, was nestled close to her, as though it was the only thing that still brought her any comfort. I knelt down beside them, and my heart broke at the sight. The mother cat didn't lift her head or respond to my presence. She was too absorbed in her grief, her spirit so broken that even the presence of another human couldn't reach her. After what felt like an eternity, the mother cat slowly looked up at me, her gaze intense, almost pleading. Then, in a quiet, unspoken moment, she walked over to my feet. Her eyes locked with mine, and for the first time in months, I saw a glimmer of something, a silent plea for help. Her eyes seemed to say, "Please, I need help. I cannot bear this pain alone anymore." I didn't know what to do at first. I had no experience with helping animals in distress, but something inside me told me that I couldn't leave her like this. I gently stroked her head, and she leaned into my touch, the smallest sign of trust. I took a deep breath, trying to find the strength to make a decision. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't leave her here to suffer. Slowly, I lifted her into my arms, cradling her as gently as I could. She didn't resist. In fact, she seemed to welcome the warmth and security of my embrace. Her kitten followed closely behind, and I made my way back into the house, feeling a mix of sadness and resolve. I had no idea how to help her, but I knew I couldn't let her go. That evening, I dug a small grave in my backyard, a peaceful resting place for the 2 kittens who had been lost to the accident. As I laid them to rest, I whispered a prayer for them, hoping they would find peace. I then brought the mother cat and her remaining kitten inside. They both seemed so fragile, like they were teetering on the edge of despair. But there was also a quiet determination in their eyes, a will to survive, to move on, to find some semblance of peace. The first few weeks were difficult. The mother cat, whom I now called Willow, seemed to be in a constant state of sorrow. She would spend hours lying in a corner, her eyes unfocused, as though lost in her memories. Her remaining kitten, whom I named Storm, would try to engage with her, but Willow often ignored him. I could see the pain in his eyes as well, but he was young, and his spirit was not yet as weighed down as his mother's. Each day, I would try to encourage Willow to come out of her shell. I'd set food in front of her, hoping she would eat, but more often than not, she would simply stare at it without touching it. I knew she was grieving, but I also knew that if she didn't eat, she would grow weaker, and the little bit of hope I had for her recovery would fade away. It was slow, agonizing work, but slowly Willow began to show signs of improvement. She would eat a little more each day, though she still refused to leave the house unless it was absolutely necessary. She began to follow me around the house, watching me with those sad but hopeful eyes. And every now and then, she would allow herself to be touched, resting her head on my lap or curling up beside me on the couch. As time went on, I began to see small changes in her behavior. She started to play with Storm again, although it was a subdued form of play. She would watch him chase after a ball or bat at a string, and sometimes she would join in, her movements slow and tentative. It was as though she was remembering what it felt like to be happy, to feel joy in the small things once again. It was a hard journey, but every small step she took toward healing was a victory. 6 months passed since I had brought Willow and Storm into my home. Willow was no longer the broken cat I had found on my doorstep. Her fur had become soft and shiny again, and her eyes, once dull and distant, now gleamed with a quiet, peaceful light. She still carried the weight of her loss, but she no longer seemed consumed by it. One evening, as I watched Willow and Storm playing together in the yard, I realized how far they had come. Willow had healed, not completely perhaps, but she had found a way to live again. She had learned to trust, to love, and to enjoy the simple pleasures of life once more. I knelt down beside her, and she looked up at me with those same eyes, but this time they were full of gratitude. It was as though she was saying, "Thank you for saving me, for giving me a second chance." I had given her a home, but in return, she had given me something far greater, an understanding of the strength of the spirit, the power of love, and the healing that comes with time. Together, we had overcome the darkest of times, and I knew that no matter what happened, we would always have each other.
Ish, ish.